Purportedly, the Los Alamos National Laboratory is going to be getting a new computer, new powerful computer. It has apparently ordered a D-Wave 2X quantum computer. That's according to TheVerge.com. And the same model has been ordered by Google and NASA's Quantum AI Lab in September as part of a large research project into quantum annealing. It's D-Wave's most powerful computer yet, boasting over 1,000 qubits of quantum processing. Installation will be a major undertaking requiring a processor room kept just fractions of a degree above absolute zero, which is yet one more reason why a quantum computer for the home market is not really there yet. But let's not be too worried about that, actually. Let's think about how computers have aged throughout the years. We are in the turn of the century, and it's actually kind of similar now to the way how things were actually about 60 years ago or so during the Second World War. Well, actually 70 years or so ago during the Second World War, where we had computers, yeah, but they were hugely expensive. You had the UNIVAC, which was a hugely expensive computer. And then you had the ENIAC, which is also a hugely expensive computer. And then eventually IBM got into the home computer market and things started to get a little bit cheaper, but really not that much cheaper for a long time. Because computer prices back then were actually still really expensive, especially when inflation is taken into account. So computer prices are still kind of high, and they're going to continue to be kind of high for quantum computers for probably a long time now. Now, for your average computer, like a silicon computer, it's actually still really, really cheap. And that's the nice thing about it, is computers nowadays are almost disposable. They're so cheap. I mean, when we're talking about computers which you can buy for only $1,000 for a really high-end machine, that means a lot when it comes to pricing. Our computers are actually so cheap nowadays that it's almost ludicrous how inexpensive these computers are. Hey, by the way, Digital Drive is brought to you by Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Cash, cash, cash. Get top dollar for your gold and silver from Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. It's at 5301 Brainerd Road. Cash, cash, cash for your gold and silver from Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Now, the thing with quantum computers, though, is that, well, on the one hand, they're very expensive. And on the other hand, there's not a whole lot of practical application for them for the consumer market. There is none right now. You can't run Microsoft Office on it. Nobody's going to want it. Something else that has to be kept in mind, too, is we've spent the last, 50 years or so using the same architecture, really the same two architectures. We've been using ARM, and we've been using x86, and some people use PowerPC. So we have these three main architectures, which everyone uses, and suddenly introducing a new one could be disastrous. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it could cause some problems for the computer market as a whole, because then we'll start seeing people with compatibility problems. Businesses will need programs written for these new quantum computers and all sorts of other things, and we'll start running into problems. Now, something that could happen, though, is these quantum computers could be so dang fast that they can just emulate x86 architecture or PowerPC or ARM or whatever, so we don't have to worry about the whole compatibility problem, which would be nice. Although, very likely, actually, it's unclear right now how Los Alamos is going to be using this machine. Much of the plan is simply to research the machine to see how it can be applied to the lab's various projects. As conventional computers reach their limits in terms of scaling and performance per watt, we need to investigate new technologies to support our mission, said Mark Anderson, who works in Los Alamos Weapons Physics Directorate. Researching and evaluating quantum annealing as the basis for new approaches to address intractable problems is essential and a powerful step, and will enable a new generation of forward thinkers to influence its evolution in a direction most beneficial to the nation. Of course, it's always the nation comes first with all these different arguments. Something to keep in mind, too, is these computers are not going to be used really for peaceful reasons. If government buys a computer, it's probably not for a peaceful purpose. Keep in mind that these computers are used for a lot of different interesting strategies. The Gulf War was one of the first wars that we ever saw where a computer was actually strategizing. And we used computers to work out our strats, basically. And it was interesting because it worked. It actually did work. Remember Jade Helm? That was helmed by a computer. And a computer planned all the different aspects of Jade Helm. And again, it worked, but it's frightening to think about. Now we have these computers which are planning everything, and it's kind of weird, actually. It's not bad, but it's kind of weird. Now, I'm very much a pacifist. I'm not a fan of military action of any sort. So I have to say that I don't agree with that bit of it. But if we look at it on a strictly technical level, it works fine. And I don't think that there's ever going to be any replacement for the physical general, but makes things interesting because we would not have the problem necessarily that we had in World War I, where none of the generals had any experience and everything was terrible. Basically, for the first few instances, the first few years of World War I, the war was just a mess because the generals did not know what they were doing. And you could argue that throughout the entirety of World War I, the generals didn't know what they were doing. But certainly in the beginning, very few generals actually had any idea how to run a war, because a wide-scale war like that one had not been run since the 1870s, and they were not even alive then. Or if they were, they had just been born, or they were in grade school at the time. So you can see the problem that they ran into a century ago. Now, fast forward to today's century, and we still kind of have the same problem. Think about war generals right now. Chances are they served in Vietnam, maybe, but they weren't actually in a command stand, maybe lieutenant, but not general in Vietnam. We're talking about wide-scale strategy, grand strategy. And these generals that we have today don't have experience with that. It's not their fault. It's good that we haven't had a large-scale war, but they don't have experience with running a large-scale war. Now, I'm saying that this is theoretical because we could technically have a large-scale war coming soon. I don't know. But theoretically, if that does happen, it seems like the best course of action is to take it out of the hands of the people in the first place. Take human error out of the equation and have everything planned by a computer. See, that's why Intel is so important now. I don't mean Intel like the computer company. I mean intelligence, military intelligence is so important nowadays. Just take that military intelligence, parse it through a machine, and then the machine will strategize your war plan for you. And it's kind of like it's like a spreadsheet program. It's like VisiCalc. It just does everything for you, which otherwise people were doing before. So this is why cyber warfare has become such a big thing today. And it's why we keep worrying about the big cyber threat. You know, we keep talking about, oh man, this cyber threat that keeps emerging. It's because we're using computers to run our wars now. And that's just the way of the new century. You know, the previous century didn't do that, but the new century, we have to, because our generals do not have experience. The last big war that we had was really on a big scale was Vietnam. And of course, we had the Gulf War, and which was a big war, and we had Iraq and Afghanistan, and we have the drone actions in Pakistan currently as well. But these aren't, and I don't mean to demean anyone who's involved in these conflicts, but these were not big scale, huge wars that we are expecting out of, say, a world war. But everyone seems to be planning for some sort of conflict with the Russians or the Chinese or whatever, or the North Koreans or the Iranians. That would be a huge war. That would actually be a really big, huge conflict, possibly global scale. And we don't have the experience to run that. I mean, yeah, we can look at the past, and there's a lot of merit to doing that. And I'm certainly not a military strategist, so take what I say with a little bit of a grain of salt. But humans don't have experience with World War presently. World War II was the last really huge scale war we had, and everyone who was involved in that war is really old now. That's just nature. That just is how it is. And especially the people who were in leadership during that war, they're not around anymore because they were already middle-aged in the 40s, and they'd be 100 now if they were alive today. So you can see why we have this kind of problem with leadership. We actually kind of need computers to run our wars for us. It's weird. It's really it's a weird concept, but we kind of need it. Now, you could argue the pacifist view too, which is what I prefer, which is we should just not have war because war is a terrible thing. And that's great, and that's a good argument, but it's not easy to convince other people of that one, right? Especially if we're talking about, say, military-industrial complex or whatever. There are people who profit off of war, and that's, again, that just is how it is. If there's a war going on, you may as well profit, right? And that line of thinking is what leads to, well, if we can profit off of war, why don't we start wars to profit off of? So then we have the entire 20th century, essentially, or at least the second half of the 20th century because of these ideas. Now, morals and ethics don't seem to run wars anymore, and certainly don't run politics anymore. Politics are not based on ethics or morals. It's all based on what can get me the most votes and the most funding. And it's probably been that way for a long time, but now we have more record of it. So we point it out as being that way today. But no, computers are actually kind of necessary for modern warfare. They're very necessary for modern warfare, not just for guiding missiles, but for doing the actual strategy. So that's why we're seeing national labs scurrying to get these advanced computers. That's why SOCOM is wanting a huge supercomputer. That's why all these different military installations have the best and the biggest supercomputers you could ever possibly buy. They're meant for war strategy. That's what it's all about. You remember the movie War Games, the Matthew Broderick movie? But I think it had Ali Sheedy in it too. Really good movie. I love that movie. I was just thinking about it yesterday and think I might watch it tonight. Really, really good movie. But if you remember in that film, Whopper is the name of the computer. And yes, that's a joke about the Burger King burger. It actually is, believe it or not. But the Whopper computer ran the global thermonuclear war system. It ran war games, literal war games. And it was designed to simulate a nuclear attack from Russia because that was the big threat in the mid-'80s when the movie came out. But this guy, Matthew Broderick, hacked into it, and it thought that an actual conflict was going on, so it's a race against the clock to stop this from happening, and yada, yada. Well, that happens today, and it happens all the time today, except now it's not just missile launches, it's also troop deployment. It's also logistics. It's everything. All the different problems that we had in the previous wars can be solved with computers now. Technology that we just did not have during our last big scale war, but now everyone has access to. The Chinese have super advanced supercomputers. I'm sure the Russians do too. It's not documented if they do. At least I've not seen the documentation. But all these different big nations, I'm sure the Indians, the Pakistanis have supercomputers. All these different nations have access to or own a supercomputer of some sort, which I'm sure is designed for grand strategy. So that's the future of warfare. It's run by machines. It's very Matrix / Cyberdyne systems from Terminator. It's the future. It's not even the future. It's now. That's what we're facing right now is warfare being launched by computers. And that's not really a moral question. It's not, well, is that good or bad? It is, because computers are much more likely to put out good strategies than a human is with no experience. Computers can draw from the experience and from the writings of every single past American general and non-American general who's not going to have bias towards one position or another and implement what it sees or deems as the best strategy possible. That's what these supercomputers are designed for. We're kidding ourselves if we think otherwise. D-Wave's quantum annealing approach is still a little bit controversial, actually, among researchers, and many are still doubting that the 2x, I should say, can produce the so-called quantum speedup that provides quantum computers with an advantage over regular processors. A benchmarking effort in June failed to find evidence of the speedup, although D-Wave has proposed alternative benchmarking systems to show more promise. That's what computers are designed for. Think about the history of computers. We can see this in looking at computer history. The internet, for heaven's sake, was designed for this very purpose. The internet was designed so that if there was some sort of global thermonuclear war, if, say, UC Berkeley gets taken out, it's still connected to the different networks. So we have communication between different military bases and different think tanks and different universities all connected to the internet. So there's not a loss of communications entirely. You still needed phone lines, but say if UC Berkeley got blown up, there's still decentralized communications with all the different networks. So that was the purpose of the internet coming into place. It was seriously a preventative measure in case a nuclear war broke out and we needed to communicate from underground. That's why the internet came to be. World Wide Web is a different story. That was a researcher in CERN in Switzerland that invented the World Wide Web, which is built on internet architecture, but it's not really the same thing. I mean, it is the internet and it's on the internet, but it's not built for the same purpose. It's built for communications between universities, yes, but also file sharing, image sharing, all sorts of other cool, fun things in a graphical landscape, as opposed to internet, which tended to be text-based, with some graphics, but mostly text-based. And all the images you had to manually download yourself. There's no such thing as HTTP. There's no such thing as HTML. Lots of stuff was messed up before the World Wide Web Consortium came out, but that's a whole nother story. The internet is weird, and the web is weird, and technology is weird, because sometimes we forget how different things are now compared to how they were even 10 years ago. We're living in a transitional time right now. I mean, again, it's the turn of the century. It actually is the turn of the century. This is 2015. Compare 2015 to 1915, 100 years before, and think about all the different progress that came from 1915 to, say, 1950. Now think about 2015 to 2050. What kind of innovations are we going to come up with? Life is going to be irrecognizable from what we have now. We won't be able to recognize life in 1950 or 2015 compared to life in 2050. It's going to be so much different. It's going to be insanely different to the point where we're not even going to recognize the same planet almost, and we're going to live to see it. That's the almost the more interesting thing, is we're going to live to see it most likely. I'll be around in 2050. I'll be old, but I'll be around in 2050. I will be 65 in the year 2050. I will be old, but I'll get to see what it'll be like, and hopefully I'll still be hipping with it. Probably not, because I'll still be using phrases like hipping with it, which are not hipping with it now. So, but I'll get to see the future and what it holds, and it's exciting. But don't fret, because next year is going to be crazily different from what we have today. And the year after that is going to be crazily different from what we had from the year before that. Technology is accelerating at such an insane speed that now technology that's coming out 5 years from now will be completely different from what we have today. Because computers, I was watching this great documentary about the history of home computers, and this guy compared it to, if the automotive industry moved at the same speed that the computer industry did, then today we would be driving flying aircraft or flying cars, which would move at four times the speed of light, and it'd be cheaper to throw away the old one and buy a new one than it would be to buy a new tank of gas. That's how crazy the computer field has moved. It's gotten so fast. It's gotten so much more different than it was before. It's almost not even recognizable. Now, right now, we have in our hands devices which are more powerful than the most powerful supercomputers were 20 years ago. That's an insane development. No other technology has progressed this way. We have moved technologically faster than any other civilization has in previous history that's recorded that we know of. Just in this century, we've moved faster forward than any other civilization we know of. That's insane to think about. We are living in a very different time than any of our other ancestors lived in. And sure, maybe somebody said that in the 1900s and they were right then too. But think about how, say, 1850, technologically speaking, wasn't a whole lot different from 1750. And an army from 1750 could go up against an army from 1850 and stand a chance. But an army from 1950 going against an army from today would not stand a chance. No way. Technology has progressed far too much. I've even read before, I was listening to this really good podcast series about history, talking about the ancient Macedonians, which could probably actually potentially beat Napoleon in Waterloo. Yeah, that's how crazily insane progress was slowed during those times. We're talking about a 1,000-year difference. But they would have stood a chance. Nowadays, the army of the 1940s would stand no chance whatsoever against the army of today, the U.S. Army of today. Things are so much different than they were before. And even just 5 years ago, we see so much difference. Look at 2007, which is almost 10 years ago now. Look at 2007, and we didn't have any smartphones. And then the iPhone came out and changed everything. And then all the different smartphones came out. And now there's almost an oversaturation of smartphones. You can't get enough of them. Everyone has a smartphone. That's such a crazy adoption rate. Think about that adoption rate. From 2007 to the present day, not even 10 years, everyone now owns one of these devices. There are now more smartphones than there are people on this planet. Think of how crazy that is. We live in a very unique time. Everything has changed. Warfare has changed. Our everyday lives have changed. How we eat has changed. How we transport ourselves has changed. How we communicate has changed fundamentally. How we think has changed. Nothing is the same as it was even 10 years ago. We live in such a different time, and I'm really excited to see what comes up next. Speaking of what comes up next, we're going to be talking a little bit about the JP Morgan scandal, about how about 100 million people had their information stolen. Kind of a lot. Also, the Wi-Fi password at the Republican National debate was kind of funny. And Apple Music is available on your Android phone. And there's some cool news about space, too. Democrats and Republicans are actually agreeing on this particular field, which might be a first, although probably not, because they agree on more things than you would expect. Asteroid mining, though, is the question. What do they agree on when it comes to asteroid mining? We'll be talking about that in just a few minutes. And don't forget to listen to Clutch the Key on Rose coming up at 1 right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. And we are always on at hotnewstalkradio.com as well, so be sure to tune in there.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Soddy Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Soddy Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Soddy Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Soddy, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report, every Sunday at 9 a.m. My guest this week has been dispensing financial advice for over 2 decades. Suze Orman will be here to explain why so many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and what we can do about growing personal debt. Don't miss Suze Orman this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report, right here on AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
President Obama makes Jimmy Carter look like Napoleon Bonaparte. We have a president that leads from behind, and when America doesn't lead, bad things happen.
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Fox News Radio, I'm Carmen Roberts. President Obama laying a wreath at Arlington Cemetery this hour as the nation honors its veterans. In his speech, he touts progress for veterans.
The backlog at the VA stands about 76,000 disability claims, a nearly 90% reduction from its peak 2 years ago.
Fox's John Decker. GOP presidential hopefuls mix it up at last night's debates. Governors John Kasich and Jeb Bush clash.
I'd like to make comment You've already made 2 comments, John. It's my turn.
Then Kasich takes on Donald Trump about deporting illegal immigrants.
Come on, folks. We all know you can't pick them up and ship them back across the border. It's a silly argument.
We have no choice if we're going to run our country properly and if we're going to be a country.
The debate hosted by Fox Business Network. Fox News, we report, you decide.
1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
The prospect of space travel is something which probably excites just about everybody, myself included. But there's something that has not been cleared up until just recently, actually. And it's something that raises a whole bunch of questions about legalities, about law, about how law even works in some regards, about jurisdiction, perhaps. Now, if you watch the movie The Martian, you probably know exactly what I'm getting at. Maritime law would apply when you're outside the jurisdiction of any government. And so if you colonize that area, you technically own it. Although if you steal something, you're technically a pirate. So the whole prospect of, say, what law rules in space may have actually been answered. The Republicans and the Democrats actually have agreed on something for once. And well, actually, I say for once, but actually they agree on most things. But Democrats and Republicans agree. If you can mine it in space, it's yours. You own it now. If you've landed on it, you've planted a flag on it, be it a corporate flag or a state flag, you own it. It's yours. So, hey, get out there, plant a flag on something. It's yours now. Although there has been an international treaty, believe it or not, that says you cannot own any part of the moon. Now, that's an important subject. You can't actually own any part of the moon, according to the UN. You can't. If, say, SpaceX got a really great shuttle or whatever that could fly up to the moon, and Elon Musk himself landed on the moon and planted the flag of SpaceX and said, I conquer this land in the name of SpaceX, well, he would technically be committing an act of piracy or at least trespassing or something, because the UN actually says that he can't do that. It's technically illegal, actually, to lay claim. Now, that's under treaty, and you could argue that he's not bound by that treaty because he is not himself a sovereign state, so that would make sense, but it's still it's a weird situation because it's something that is thoroughly unexplored. Well, not thoroughly, but mostly unexplored. We've not gone very far in space. We haven't done a whole lot in space, actually, at least in the grand scheme of things. I mean, we've done a lot for our scale, but on the space scale of things, we've barely even touched the surface of what we can do with space. During the last 15 years, one of the most promising developments in U.S. spaceflight has been a proliferation of new businesses entering the sector. It's not just SpaceX, but rather a host of companies like Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and many others who are seeking to make a buck or two in outer space. Well, on Tuesday evening, Congress took a key step towards encouraging the development of this industry by passing H.R. 2262, House Resolution 2262, the U.S. Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act, with bipartisan support. The legislation provides a number of pro-business measures, such as establishing legal rights for U.S. citizens to own resources in outer space, as well as extending indemnification for commercial launches through 2025. So let's say I manage to launch into space, right? I myself launched into space, and I land on an asteroid, which happens to somehow, okay, let's say I landed on a planet, actually, which happens to have an atmosphere, actually, and I can say now, this is my planet. I own it now, and anyone who comes on it is trespassing, and you're going to get capped, son. So don't even try to step to me, because this is my planet now. And I could land on an asteroid and do the same thing. The resources on this asteroid belong to me and me alone, and nobody else can even attempt to take it, because I will blast you out of space, and I will henceforth be known as whatever I am, I guess, Blackbeard, because I do have one. So, well, sort of. I could if I wanted to. I guess I would be Space Blackbeard. That'd be kind of cool, actually. I would totally do that. I see what Watney's going for now. So if you watch The Martian or read The Martian, you understand some of the concepts we're talking about, or even if you didn't, it's easy to understand, but you sort of get the application if you watch The Martian, where he talks about maritime law, and it actually does make sense. So if you're not under the jurisdiction of any sovereign state or nation or whatever, then you're technically under maritime law, which makes sense, because if we're talking about international waters where no state has any jurisdiction, you're now under maritime law. And minors can drink, which is awesome. So take a cruise and go drink, young kids. I don't know. But that's how I got out of it when we were kids. We just drove out to international waters. At least that's what we told ourselves the lake was, international waters. But whatever. I'm kidding. The bill provides the boost America's private space partners need as they lead the world into the future, said Lamar Smith, a Texas Republican who chairs the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee. This bill will keep America at the forefront of aerospace technology, create jobs, reduce red tape, promote security, or rather safety, he says, and inspire the next generation of explorers. Woohoo. Space mining advocates, including Planetary Resources, are praising the new law, saying many years from now we will view this pivotal moment in time as a major step toward humanity becoming a multiplanetary species, said Eric Anderson, who's the co-founder and co-chairman of the asteroid mining company, which is backed by actually several Google founders as well, saying this legislation establishes the same supportive framework which created the great economies of history, and it will foster the sustained development of space. So we could, in our lifetime, see the new Weyland-Yutani, or perhaps the Tyrell Corporation. We could see these things in our lifetimes. How fun would that be? Where there's some international, or rather interplanetary space mining rig, which goes out and mines different asteroids and returns home with loads and loads of silicon or diamond or gold or whatever else is out in space. Although, what would that do to the nation's gold reserves if suddenly we found tons and tons of it out in space that was easily obtained, and we could just fly it right back to Earth, and suddenly there's tons of gold which didn't exist on Earth before? It'd be interesting anyway to see what would happen if that happened. Technology would suddenly have broken the gold standard entirely, which I don't know if I want that to happen. Probably someone would pass a bill saying you can't bring gold onto Earth because gold has to stay on Earth and yada, yada. But anyway, in addition to mineral rights and indemnification, the new law also extends the so-called learning period, which protects space tourism companies by requiring paying customers to fly at their own risk, and it prevents the FAA from stepping in unless there's a major accident. The bill also extends the lifetime of the International Space Station throughout the year 2024, ensuring the viability of commercial projects on board the orbiting lab, which is actually a good thing because, I mean, all of it's really good. I can't see anything bad about this bill, which is surprising because I like to find things which are bad in different House resolutions, but I can't see anything here. Both the House and Senate have now passed the measure, which will go to President Obama. He is expected to sign. Of course, if he didn't, I no idea why he wouldn't. I'm sure he will. But no, it's weird. Space is weird to think about. And it's weird to think about what we could see in just the next few years in what we're looking at with space. I mean, things are completely different now than how they were before, as we were talking about earlier. And so what could we be seeing in the future when it comes to space travel? Technology is progressing so quickly that who knows what's coming next. Technology is moving at such light speeds that tomorrow we could have actual light speed, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear that. If tomorrow some science team came out and said, we now can break the speed of light barrier, the light barrier is now broken, and we can travel faster than the speed of light, and so space travel is now a cinch. If I heard that tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised. And that just shows the state of things now. And you probably wouldn't be surprised either. Things are progressing so quickly that nothing really surprises me anymore. Medical science has gotten so much better than it was before. And I really don't understand all the people who wish we could go back to the Romantic era and all these different times. I don't understand it. I don't understand a lot of things, I guess. Like, I don't understand camping. I don't get it. Why do you want to do it? We spent how many years? 200 something years, longer than that, developing all these technologies to make sure we're comfortable and to make sure that we're not out in the elements. And then you want to go out in the elements, spitting in the face of every modern inventor. Why would you want to do that? I mean, I know you're not, but I mean, why would you want to do that? My family's big into that, and it drives me nuts because I don't get it. You know, camping, cycling, all these different things. I'm like, why do you want to do that? Like, we came out with all these cool technologies to make sure you don't have to do that. And there you go, wanting to do it. Come on. I don't understand it. I don't understand people who don't want to listen to music that was composed by a computer either, but I'm weird that way too. I'm kidding. I've listened to music composed by computers. It does not sound good. It sounds far too robotic and it sounds inhuman. I don't know. It's weird. I guess computers haven't really gotten caught on yet to the whole composing music thing, but oh, Vale, someday, comrade, you will discover how to make music on computer. Anyway, the U.S. is charging 3 men with widespread hacking whose targets included J.P. Morgan. Oh, boy. On Tuesday, federal prosecutors unsealed charges against 3 men, revealing details of a sprawling criminal enterprise that involved hacking some of the U.S.'s biggest financial institutions, as well as the theft of personal financial information pertaining to 100, you ready? 100 million customers. 100 million customers. I didn't even know JP Morgan had 100 million customers, but wow. With that information, the man allegedly made off with hundreds of millions of dollars too. What would you do with hundreds of millions of dollars? Gosh, I would buy the presidency with hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, what could you do with that kind of money? What could you do with hundreds of millions of dollars? The funny thing is, I've thought about this before. I've thought about some fluke where I find $1 million lying on the street. What would I do? I'd probably do exactly what I'm doing right now because I like what I do. I mean, like if I won the lottery, I'd probably be doing exactly what I'm doing right now because I like what I do. I would be right here every weekday at 12 and doing the news at 5 and all the other things I do around here. I'd be doing exactly the same thing even if I won the lottery because I don't know what else to do. This is all I know. Radio is all I know. I don't know what else to do. If suddenly something happened and everyone else died at the radio station and I walked in and there was no one around, I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, I would run the radio station, but I wouldn't know what to do. I couldn't get a job anywhere else. I'm far too grounded in this. Man, if I suddenly had to get a job doing network administration or whatever, I'd be totally in over my head. I'm not used to that sort of thing. I need what I do now. I can't do anything else. So what I do now is what I have to do. I'm not flexible that way. So it's not like I feel like it would be beneath me to go fast food or retail or something like that. I know it's not, but I would feel that way. I'd be like, man, I used to be on radio. I had my own radio show. Media people cared about me. And they'd be like, yeah, get back to stalking. I couldn't do that, man. That would just, I couldn't do it. And I know it's not beneath me to do it. It's not beneath anybody to do that sort of thing. But it's just I would feel like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I couldn't handle that. But anyway, so newly unsealed charges are accusing Jerry Shalon, who's a 31-year-old Israeli, of masterminding the hacks, which resulted in the loss of personal information pertaining to some 100 million customers of U.S. financial institutions, and accused Joshua Aaron, a 31-year-old American, of acting as a conspirator in the hacking operation, and Ziv Orenstein, the most Israeli name ever. He's a 40-year-old Israeli, allegedly operated legal casinos and payment processors with Shalon and controlled shell companies for Shalon. Both Shalon and Orenstein were arrested in July, and Aaron remains at large. Aaron, by the way, it says he's American. He is, but he spent a lot of time in Israel as well, which might lead to some sort of connection between the other people involved. Allegedly, of course, we don't know. It's speculation, but he's still reportedly at large. We don't know where he is, and that's... well, I don't know if it's frightening because I don't think he's like armed and dangerous or anything, but it's still kind of it's weird to think about, I guess. It's weird. Well, this show is brought to you by Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Get cash. Get top dollar for your gold and silver from Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. 5301 Brainerd Road. That's right. Cash. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. If you've got any junk jewelry that you don't want, take it to 5301 Brainerd Road. That's Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. So if you got any jewelry that you want somebody to take them off your hands, go to 5301 Brainerd Road for cash. Hey, coming up next after me is, of course, Clutch with Keon Rose right here on Hot News Talk Radio. He is our resident sports expert. He knows far more about sports than I ever could hope to. And his show is on every weekday from 1 to 2 here at Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. And he's been hitting some heavy subjects recently, too. Race relations and all sorts of other things. And rather interesting. And the funny thing is, I was thinking about that, too. The funny thing about, the difference of opinions that we have here, and they're few and far between. you'd be hard-pressed to find a major difference between the ways of thinking between most of the people here. Like, some people are very pro this or pro that. Some of us are very anti this or anti that. But the basic goal is still the same, which is educating people and being entertaining and just being good people on the air, really pushing our message, I suppose, which is just be a good person, really. I mean, it's different people have different ideas of how that's supposed to work. But no, we all basically agree on most everything. But the funny thing is, even though we disagree on some things, we're so libertarian minded that even if we disagree with someone to the utmost degree, we still say, well, it's your right to say that. I'm not going to stop you. It'd be hypocritical of me to stop you. It's kind of funny because that almost gets in the way sometimes, where I'm like, you want to use that old argument of you can't say that, you just want to, but you shouldn't, because it's such a dumb argument. You can't say that, you can say whatever you want. I don't agree with it, but you can say whatever you want. It's funny how that works out. But yeah, Coach Keon Rose is on every weekday from 12, or rather from 1 to 2. I'm on from 12 to 1. He's on from 1 to 2. Whew, gotta get my time straight. That time shift has been messing me up, man. That happened like 2 weeks ago. That time shift has been messing me up. I can't wait for daylight, I guess, regaining. I don't know, moving our clocks forward again. I can't wait, because I'm tired of going home when it's dark out and everything is closed and it's a mess and you can't see on the interstate because for some reason there's no street lights and it's really weird. And but anyway, there are newly unsealed charges which are accusing these three, one American and two Israelis, one of which lived in Israel for a long time. The one American lived in Israel for a long time, I should say, for allegedly stealing quite a bit of information from a bunch of different financial institutions and even financial papers as well, like the Wall Street Journal. Chief among the allegations is that Shalon and Aaron used their unauthorized access to financial institutions to artificially manipulate certain U.S. stock prices through a pump and dump scheme. These two allegedly used lists of personal customer information to market stocks, allowing Shalon and Aaron to their criminal. I'll get it in a minute. Shalon and Aaron's criminal operation, there we go, to sell high despite their stock's actual value. As the operation sold shares, the stock's price plummeted, leaving defrauded investors with significant losses, the indictment says. U.S. authorities also charged that Shalon and his co-conspirators operated illegal gambling websites, processed payments for criminals selling anything from illegal pharmaceuticals to malware, and operated an illegal U.S.-based Bitcoin exchange, which ran afoul of U.S. anti-money laundering laws. Wow. So these guys are like the cyber mafia, basically. And it's funny, too, where you hear a lot of different descriptions of how cyber theft works and how identity theft works and all these different things. And it's funny sometimes because you're sitting there and you're thinking, like, that's a bad description of how it works. And it's like, I don't know, because I heard one description of like cyber shoplifting. I'm like, it's not anywhere close to cyber shoplifting. It has nothing at all to do with cyber shoplifting. What are you talking about? And all these different things. It's more like breaking and entering, really. But there are whole books on the process you have to go through to get into these different systems. One of which is really good. The Art of Deception by Kevin Mitnick is a wonderful book if you're interested in how the whole process works, because a lot of hacking, it doesn't actually have to do with computers. A lot of hacking is actually just manipulating people, social engineering. And it's not that hard sometimes. If you just say you're the right person, and if you give the right sort of hint that you are the right person, then people will give you pretty much anything. It's funny how that works out. There's a scenario that Kevin Mitnick proposed where you basically just call up a bank and say you're with the IRS and you lost your computer information and you needed to get some details on some guy, and they're all too happy to oblige. Now, that was a long time ago in the late 90s. Things are probably a little bit different now, post 9/11 and everything, but it was entirely possible back then to get all sorts of information, and who knows who got away with it back then too. I've read really funny stories sometimes about people changing the phone identification of different people, the how a phone is labeled, so that their home phone was then labeled as a prison phone. So when you called, it would say to please insert 25 cents and all these different things. It was really funny stuff, but it could be done back then. It can be done today. And it's, I don't know, like a lot of hacking is not as technical as perhaps we like to think that it is. A lot of it is the human side. And really, it's human error that causes most problems. It's someone on the human end misinterpreting the data, though that's not always the case. Remember the story about the Nina song, 99 Luftballons or 99 Red Balloons, where a bunch of balloons were released in the air in West Germany, and someone's radar picked it up as a nuclear launch, and they came very close to nuking Russia or America or some country, all because of this one computer error in interpretation. And potentially we could have had a horrible disaster because of it. But no, it's funny how sometimes just stupid mistakes can cause disastrous problems. And perhaps that's the case here with the JP Morgan hack, where someone made a dumb mistake and let them in, and then it led to what we have now. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird situation. We don't have the whole story yet, but these people now have quite a few different charges being pressed against them. I mean, a lot of charges being pressed against them, and it seems like it's just never ending, the different charges. And plus, they haven't caught Aaron yet, so who knows what's going to happen to him, and who knows if there's going to be some sort of weird shootout or standoff or whatever. Today's unsealed indictment also paints an interesting picture of how some of the network intrusions allegedly occurred. The U.S. Attorney General claims that Aaron was a customer of many of the hack companies, and he gave his login credentials to Shallon and an unnamed co-conspirator who performed analysis of the company's networks. Now, note that it says unnamed co-conspirator. Now, this is pure speculation, but usually when there's an unnamed co-conspirator, that person might actually be an informant. So keep that in mind. That might be the case, but again, that's speculation. This is allegations. Well, anyway, Shallon and the co-conspirator later accessed the company's networks and placed malware on them to allow them to steal information about customers over a period of months. Back in August, the New York Times reported that the suspected hackers had stolen a JP Morgan employee's credentials and were able to access the company's network because one of its servers did not have two-factor authentication turned on. The indictment did not confirm or deny that version of events, although that does seem rather likely. A two-stage authentication, by the way, would be, let's say you're logging into a computer network and it needs to be sure that you are you. So to ensure that you are you, get a text saying, please text this or please enter this message into the computer screen. It'll be 4-digit code or whatever. That happens a lot. That's two-stage authentication. I mean, even Steam does that. Google will do that for Gmail, all sorts of other things. So it's pretty standard. And it would be really surprising if JP Morgan didn't have that sort of authentication. I would be amazed if JP Morgan didn't have that sort of authentication. But on the other hand, sometimes these large financial institutions also tend to be kind of inept. So who knows? And again, look at Enron. I mean, look what took down Enron and Lehman Brothers and all sorts of other entities. It was just pure ineptitude on the side of the criminals that led to them being taken down. So who knows? I don't know. JP Morgan being hacked in this way is going to have a lot of people is going to cause a lot of people, I'm trying to get my words together, going to cause a lot of people to lose faith in JP Morgan. So who knows what that is going to be meaning for the future of the company. Maybe nothing, maybe a whole lot. Have to wait and see. By 2014, last year, Shallon and Aaron apparently set their sights on bigger cons and tried to hack into a company identified in the indictment as one of the world's largest financial services corporations, providing mutual fund, online stock brokerage, and other services with headquarters in Boston, Massachusetts. Wow. So, yeah, we'll talk more about this on the news at 5, by the way, as more information is still pouring out of the Department of Justice. We'll keep you updated on that right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. By the way, you should always listen to Hot News Talk Radio for your traffic updates, because if there is a major traffic accident, we will let you know right here on Hot News Talk Radio. There was a pretty major wreck on northbound 75 in Bradley County yesterday. We kept you informed about that and directed you to not go to work on 75 northbound. So take my advice. Listen to Hot News Talk Radio. Culture Keon Rose is up next.
This is a mob world. This is the mob world.